Here we go.
All right. Shall we let them in?
Let's do this thing.
Let's do it. All righty.
Welcome, everybody.
We'll just wait a couple of minutes until everybody's connected and in the room here.
I think we're good. Why don't we just get started?
All righty. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Denise Pinard. I'm a volunteer with the UCMaster Gardeners of Santa Cruz and Monterey counties. And I'd like to welcome you today to our program on integrated pest management. Before we get started, the usual requests regarding Zoom, which we're all getting pretty comfortable with, but please double check that your microphone is muted. And we also ask that you turn your video off. It minimizes distractions and it'll help our presentation run really smoothly. For your best experience, we recommend you use speaker view. And if you have any technical questions, I'll be happy to help you with them. You can just message me in the chat and we'll get you up and running. We've enabled the live transcript feature, and right down at the bottom of your screen is a button. You can click on that for real-time closed captioning. Anytime during the program, you can submit your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them all at the Q&A session after the presentation. Just a reminder, the event is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording within a few days. And then, for those of you who may not be familiar with the University of California Master Gardener Program, we've been around for over 40 years now. We're all volunteers working in partnership with the Agriculture and Natural Resources Division of the University of California. We all receive comprehensive training, and we provide outreach and research-based education on horticulture, pest management, and sustainable practices for home gardeners in our local communities. And now that you know a little bit about us, I'm going to turn this over to our speaker for today, Elise Ware.
Thank you all for being here. I have good news and bad news today. The good news is I'm Elise. I'm a master gardener, have been since 2014. I have at least 40 years of growing experience, food, flowers, herbs, and fruit treats. And I used to work for a seed company, and I love to teach. I really do love to teach. So I teach way too many of these classes. My partner in crime here is Loretta Heath, and Loretta also graduated in 2014 with me. She works at a nursery in Santa Cruz. So she's one of those people that you bring your fuzzy leaf in or your bug, and you show her, over the counter, what is this thing and what can you sell me to fix it? And she gets much more input than I do from gardeners about what's bothering their gardens. So she is a great person to partner with on this class. Unfortunately, she has been caught in traffic. So she is going to be joining us a little while later, and we'll integrate her into the class when she arrives and gets all set up. She also raises old Gloucestershire spotted hogs on her little farm, which is in Corlitos area. So before we get started with what we have prepared, we thought we would find out what brought you here. What is bothering you? So Denise, if you would launch this quick poll, it's 2 questions. We're going to give you a couple of minutes to answer these questions. Wow. Here we go. $11 out of 15. 13. Boy, we're getting there. Very good. All right, 13, 86%. I'm gonna say that we're pretty close. Vegetables are winning. Leaves getting chewed is definitely an issue. Other people are doing fruit and flowers. It's pretty much your basic backyard for most people. And then we're having issues with wilting. Not seeing the insects, but the leaves are getting decimated. And sometimes they're acting funny and misshapen. Okay, that helps me out. And we're gonna learn a little bit about how to diagnose these problems ourselves. And you can see that we've asked you not only what are you growing, but what's the damage you're seeing. We're not asking you what is chewing on your leaves because that's jumping the gun. So I'm gonna let's close the poll. We're gonna move on. Thank you for that. So there are hundreds and thousands and gazillions of insects in the world. Probably 98% of them are good guys, and then there are a few who are bad guys, and we focus a lot of our attention on that. But the way to solve any pest problem with the least invasive, least offensive to the environment type of way is by using a process called integrated pest management. And it's very important that you use those principles, and that's what we're going to teach today. Not so much particular pests, but how to diagnose what the pest is and what the best solution is for the plant in the situation that it's in. So everything is relative, everything depends. We're also going to focus on top 10 summer insect pests that we expect you to run into, and some are worse than others, and go over a very high level on disease and what you can do about disease, and also where to get further help. Many of you may have come here because of gophers or rats or moles or something along those lines, but that is a completely different class that we teach later in the year or earlier in the year. So if that is what your problem is, and we have time at the end, I'm happy to speak to that. If not, we will basically be skipping that and encouraging you to take the class when we offer it later in the year. Down here are links to the presentations that we teach for those classes and a deer-resistant plant list if deers are your problems. So those are resources. You're going to get the slide deck in the email after class, and that should be able to help you out. So IPM is ecosystem based. It is focusing on natural control factors as well as techniques that are minimally disruptive. That's the key thing. And they only use chemicals as a last resort. So we try to lean towards organic when we can. And it involves a process. I won't go too far into the process, but there are steps. You don't know you have a problem until you have inspected, and you want to inspect your plants as often as you possibly can. I usually do that when I'm standing there with a hose and hand watering. I like to hand water just to know what's going on. the best approach is to try and prevent. We'll talk about the 2 most effective preventative measures you can use. And we'll talk about certain things you can prevent for that you can expect within a combination of plant and pest. So not all pests go to all plants. They tend to be species specific, except there are a few generalists. Then the very important step is knowing, well, identification of the pest and identification of the plant that it's on and what the needs for that plant are. So you can make sure that you're growing the plant in as healthy a way as it wants to make it less vulnerable to pests. Once you've figured all that out, you select a treatment, a way to address it, and then you keep on monitoring it to see if it's working. And then in a perfect world, because you're so scientific, you write it all down. Loretta has arrived. I got a message. So let me just get through this slide and then I'm going to hand it over to you, Loretta. Does that sound good? You want to unmute?
Will I take control or do I have to have it called up? My own copy.
I will be clicking the slides. So you'll just do the speaking.
Okay, perfect.
Great. Welcome, Loretta.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm late.
Okay, like I was saying, know your host plant. What is the plant that's being affected? What kind of water does it want? What kind of sun does it want? What kind of fertilizer does it want? Is it getting enough airflow? Is it the right time of year to be growing it? How's the soil for that plant? You need to know all those things to know that the little white bugs that are flying around are whiteflies as opposed to maybe flying aphids or even termites or some other similar insect that might be in the neighborhood. So as I said, some are generalists. Whitefly is an example. In a greenhouse situation, they will kind of land and suck the juices out of any plant it can find. And others are specialists. These are cucumber beetles, and they much prefer the cucurbit family. So that would be squash, cucumbers. I believe melons are in that family as well. So it tends to be they specialize on a plant family, not a specific plant. And now I'm going to hand it over to my friend Loretta here.
Okay, so the first thing you want to do is evaluate, can you live with this pest or this situation? Is coexistence an option? So how much damage is really being done? If it's just a few leaves, you can pluck them off with the pests on them, get rid of them. Is it a permanent plant? Is it an annual vegetable that you're growing in your garden, or is it a perennial, something that's been in your garden for years? And you want to consider that. Define your economic and aesthetic limits. How much are you willing to pay, or how much time are you willing to put in to eradicate the pest versus can you live with a few chewed up leaves? So define your limit. If you absolutely can't handle a few holes on some leaves, then you're going to have to take some time to figure out your pest and figure out the safest way to eradicate it. Can you share? Do you have enough green beans? Yeah, do you have enough green beans planted to let a few go to the beetle or the earwig that cut it off at the ground? So look at the rate that you have to look at. Like Elise said before, you're looking at your plants all the time or as much as you can, so you can determine the rate of how often is this thing happening, and that'll help you figure out if it's something you can live with as well. Okay, so the focus, of course, is on prevention. So when you have a diverse ecosystem, this is the first thing you want to look at. Is your soil healthy with lots of good mycorrhizae and fungi in your soil that helps keep your plant healthy? Are you rotating your crops? You don't want to plant a tomato in the same spot every year, or you're heading downhill with that plant really quickly. And monitor at least weekly look at your plants and look at their situation, make sure nothing's getting out of hand. So what are the best preventive measures? So if you can plant some insectary plants for the beneficials, if you look at the picture, there's a lot of blooming plants around. All those attract beneficials to your garden and may even attract some of the not so good ones away from the ones you want to eat. Maybe they'll prefer something out there, but the beneficials are important to have. And so if you have the room, plant those beneficials and insectary plants. Next thing you want to look at for preventive measure is a barrier. The lower picture is showing a thin, light, they also call it floating row cover that you can put over your crops, and it's a barrier. You can bury it in on the side or weigh it down with some rocks or something to keep it from blowing away. And it lets plenty of sunshine in and keeps the pests off your plants.
Can I show this list?
Yes.
So this is a really great resource page. It shows you the plant that you can plant and the beneficial predators that it will attract.
That's a really good list. You want those lacewings and ladybugs. You want all those good beneficials. So
Great.
plant them. So one of the last things on there was a dormant oil spray for fruit trees, and it's under barrier because it does, that light oil does form a barrier, and it smothers eggs and smothers soft-bodied insects. So it's a good, safe thing to use. There are also light horticultural oils you could use in the non-winter season, like summertime spray oils as well. Okay, Ipm Controls. So it's divided up here into 4 different categories of control. Your cultural, which involves removing debris that may serve as hiding places. Earwigs and coachy bugs love to hide under there. Snails like to hide under debris in cool, moist places, etc. Plant a trap crop. That's what we were talking about before, something that, you know, your particular pest may prefer to your strawberries or whatever. Try a repellent crop. Marigolds, sometimes garlic. Sometimes these pungent plants can provide a bit of a bad situation for a bug that are an unfavorable one, and it just won't come around if it doesn't like the smell. Thinning your fruit. You can overtax a fruit tree, for example, if you leave too much fruit on it. Not only can you break the branches, but you're taxing its strength and its nutrient load. And so thin and have the appropriate growing environment for your plant. So some of the physical controls: exclude or trap. So your floating row cover, those are reusable for several years if you take care of them. So it's a good investment to have it. Bagging your fruit. I've seen people really, this is an extreme, but you can buy or make little net bags, mesh bags, tie them around your fruit, individual peaches or apples, or so to prevent a moth getting on there and laying eggs for something to burrow in your fruit. Pheromone traps. These are nice to use if you put them out at the right time. And they usually have a hormone that attracts the male, thinks there's a female in there, and you'll get them trapped in that and stuck in there, and hopefully you'll have less multiplication of the bad insects using those. And yellow sticky traps are a good physical barrier too. They're attracted to the yellow and it's sticky, and you'll find all kinds of interesting bugs when you use those sticky traps in your garden. Biological controls. Encourage your natural enemies. So grow nectar plants for beneficials. We saw that list before. Let the chickens out to eat snails and slugs if you're in between crops, because they can decimate a crop if you let them out there when you have something planted. But when it's time, yeah, let them out. They pluck all kinds of stuff out of the ground, and they kind of almost till for you too. They make the ground a lot fluffier. They scratch it up. And if you have a good habitat for birds, they eat lots of insects. So if you have nice shrubs and little maybe some little grain heading types of plants that the birds will come in and eat, or all kinds of things can make a nice habitat for birds. And then of course your chemical, these are your last resort, but you have your chemical controls in the forms of sprays and granules. So start with your least toxic. We recommend you go with OMRI approved first, so that's an organic certification. And use as directed. If a little's good, it's not that a lot is better, so please use as directed, the frequency and the application rate quantities. But you need to really know your pests. That's so important, because you could be spraying with something that is never going to affect that pest if you don't know the pest and know that that spray is effective for it, right? So be sure you know what it is that you're trying to repel.
Any questions on this first part about the overall process? We move on. So Loretta, you want to take the case study?
Okay, so yeah, we'll go through this just as a something to get you familiar with how we would think of things. So here's an example. You have an apple tree and you're seeing the new growth in the spring is showing this curled and dark spots, and it's looking pretty ugly on the branch tips of your apple tree. That's a symptom.
Has anybody ever had that?
Yes.
You can mention it in the chat. Weird gnarled curled leaf tips.
So now you do your inspection, and what is it? These are pictures of what you will be seeing, of what you see. You look close up at those tips. Something green, something crawling, something kind of dark over here, something that looks like a crocodile, something that looks like an insect, and these little things with holes in them, or these little shells, things with holes in them. So that's this is what we saw when we inspect. So now, what do we know, or what can we look for? So consider your cultural considerations. Is this apple tree healthy otherwise? Is it getting enough water? Does it have mulch on it? Are you feeding it at the right times? Does it have the proper support if it's a young tree? So think about those, because a lot of times if a tree or a plant is underfed, it will be susceptible to things, bugs, disease. And likewise, if it's overfed, a lot of tender new growth can be susceptible to things too if it has too much new growth because it's overfed.
There's all kinds of cultural considerations that could weaken the plant. So too much or too little food, sun, water, all kinds of things. Damaged roots, you never know. So let's
planting it too deep. Yeah, planting it too deep. Yeah.
We have a healthy tree. It's being treated the way it should, so that's not the problem.
Okay, we're moving on. So what's the next thing when we analyze our situation? So we have a great link here. This is to the University of California's IPM link, and you can do all kinds of searches. For the example, we're going to search for curling leaves on apple. You can also look up things by plant, by pest, if you know once you know what the pest is. And there's a plant problem diagnostic tool. So keep that link always available to yourself, because you will use it over and over again for all kinds of things.
Yes, if you learn nothing today, learn IPM website. So you go to the home and garden section of the website. You browse by plant. You can look for problems there. If you think you know what the pest is, you can browse by pest. And over here is a diagnostic tool. And it's like a little decision tree. It'll ask you a series of questions and then come up with some potential solutions. Or
we have a resource for you too. You can ask a master gardener. We have a hotline, and you can call or submit your questions in various ways. So you can follow that link. And if a master gardener can't help you, they have access to professionals that can help you get you an answer.
So we did all that research and here's what we found out.
We have ants farming aphids, right? So the aphid sucks the juices out of the plants and exude what we call honeydew. I don't know if it's pee or poop or vomit, but it exudes from these aphids and it's sweet. And so that's what the ants are eating. And a lot of this black stuff is mildew or the sooty mold that's forming with those sugars, because fungus likes sugars too. So you're getting all kinds of things going on. So you have the aphids, the ants, possible sooty mold.
And the ants will actually defend the aphids from predators, from natural enemies.
They do, and they
So the
move them
ants are a big
around.
problem.
Yeah, they'll move them around and protect them. So you might spray in one part of your garden, and if you see ants, they might be busy moving aphids to other places. They're going to try to.
And if you ever wonder why there's so many aphids so quick, it's because they're born pregnant, literally. Born pregnant.
Yes, they have a very short cycle. They can just pop them out live. And they're also, you can get a flying form of an aphid that can fly. So it doesn't have to crawl onto the plant. It can fly there if the ant doesn't move it there. So aphids are a marvel in how quickly they can reproduce. So that little crocodile looking bug there, that's a ladybug larva. Don't get rid of those. Don't be afraid of them. They eat more aphids than the mature lady beetle. So you want to encourage the ladybugs and their larvae. And that one is caught in the act of eating a larva, that ladybird beetle. She's actually munching one. Or he, it doesn't necessarily have to be female.
And then
these little shell-like things with the hole in it, those were actually aphids that a parasitic wasp laid an egg into the aphid body, and it ate the aphid from the inside out and then hatched. So you're seeing aphid carcasses after being parasitized by a nice little parasitic wasp, parasitoid wasp. So getting back to our case study, is it really a problem? Does it look like these, if it's just a few tips, even if you might have some really good growth and it's still just the tip of the good growth, is it going to kill the tree? Probably not. Will it reduce fruit yield? That's for you to evaluate. Is it introducing disease, stunting the growth or weakening the tree? Is it purely cosmetic? And will it take care of itself? Is it something that will, in a couple weeks, may not be an issue anymore because it's a short-lived pest or something like that? So ask yourself, is it really a problem? And those are good questions to use to ask yourself. So what are some management strategies for these aphids in particular? A strong spray of water will wash them off. Of course, if the ants are still there, they'll bring them right back. Like Elise said, they can come back quickly. Can you just with a cultural methodology, can you just prune off those tips and have a nice looking tree, dispose of what you prune off of? I don't know that you necessarily want to compost it if it also had other disease on it besides the aphids. So dispose of it properly. Another cultural, you can put some sticky, gooey stuff called tanglefoot around the tree trunk to control the ants. They'll get stuck in it and they won't be able to keep going up and down your tree trunk. There's also ant baits you can use as well to try to control the ants, but that'll stop it at that particular point. So biological controls. You saw that there were predators already there. You had larval and adult ladybird beetles, so they were chowing down. So maybe because of that, if you started using a chemical, you would kill the good ones too. So something important to look at. And then what's a low tox chemical? Well, soap spray is effective. It kind of the soap kind of pops those soft aphid bodies, soft insect bodies too. So we decided a chemical wasn't required. We're going to use jets of water and soap spray and some tanglefoot to keep the ants off.
And frankly, I find a strong spray of water will often just do the trick.
Right, you won't see them come back.
Yeah, or you just keep spraying it and knock them off.
Yeah,
Not a
be
big
persistent. Yeah, it is. All right, so who's in the garden?
Let's get
So,
specific.
Okay, arthropods are jointed foot insects. Those are, so we're going to look first at the beneficial arthropods or insects. So we already saw this, the adult and the larval form of the ladybird beetle, and they like to eat aphids. And both the larval stage, the little alligator looking thing, and the adults will munch those. Praying mantis. Mantises are predators, a generalist predator, so they'll eat everything and anything just about. So you may see them munching a good insect in your garden, but they're good to have around because they eat a lot of bad things too that are in your garden, and they're just really cool. You ever watch one eat a spider? It's just amazing. You just bite the head off really quickly and then they're gone.
Neato.
Okay. I saw one once. I was like, wow, it just bit the head right off that. It was a black widow spider. Okay. Pirate bugs, minute pirate bugs. So they eat a variety of small insects. So you can see they have a particular little pattern. They're easy to recognize. They have a little triangle on their back. And it's both the adult and nymph forms that eat a variety of insects. Lacewings, very beneficial to eat lots of small insects. And they're a really delicate little green insect with a very detailed nerve pattern on their wings. They're pretty. Syrphid flies, they kind of look like a little tiny bee or little tiny wasps. They're easy to confuse with a bee, but they're a fly, and they're really good to have around your garden too. They eat aphids and other soft-bodied insects. They're in their larval form. So you may see them in their adult form flying around, and that's a good thing. It's not a wasp.
And I'd like to point out that you can buy ladybird beetles, praying mantis egg cases, and lacewings. Some of them you can find at your local plant store, and lacewings you can buy online. So I find there's no reason to do that. You just grow some flowers and they show up.
That's a cheap way to do it. We've had a lot of people come into the nursery and say, I let out my ladybugs and they flew away. There's directions on how to do it. Try to maximize how much stay around by doing it in the evening, etc. But yeah, they may just fly away. So keep that in mind too. Okay, another section on arthropods, the beneficial parasitoids. So these are the ones that kill that bad insect by laying an egg in it in some way. So we have the tryptogramma wasps. So it's a parasitic wasp, and it preys on a wide range of herbivore egg hosts on a wide range of plants. It's the adult that's the predator, lays its eggs in them. Tachnid fly, it's a parasitic fly.
Yeah.
Tachnid, cute little thing. And yeah, it just looks like a little housefly when you see it. Again, it preys on a variety of herbivore hosts on a range of plants. So you look at it, it lays in the caterpillar. That's really cool to get rid of caterpillars with a parasitoid. Hyposter. Oh, go ahead. All right, so don't be afraid of these. They're beautiful. Well, most of the time. The golden garden spiders, really cool. So don't be afraid of spiders. They eat a lot of bugs in your garden. And then, of course, the wasp. I have a love-hate relationship with this thing because I can see them chowing down on a caterpillar, and it's great to see them when they do that. But then when you're barbecuing and they come sting your arm for no reason, that's no fun. So they like meat and they come around too when you're cooking. But it's a good It's a good thing. to
Always
have
a trade-off. Yep.
Yep, always a trade-off. So out of the top, about the top 10 insects you're going to see, or pests you're going to see in your garden or in your orchard.
And these are for summer. These are warm season.
Okay, warm
pests.
season, low risks. The aphids, they cause disfigurement, but in general, they're not going to kill your plant. Cabbage worms, they'll munch a few leaves or make holes in something. Again, just evaluate whether you can live with it. If it's going through every leaf on your cabbage, then you're going to do something about it because it's ruining everything. Mealy bugs, you usually find these in small little patches in a nice, moist, shady spot in a tree or on a plant that isn't getting a lot of sun, and it's a good place for them to hide and multiply. But they can cause some leaves, especially when they colonize around the base of a leaf. They can cause them to drop off with their sucking action, but they're not going to hurt the whole tree or plant. Cabbage or loopers, another caterpillar, low risk. And leaf rollers. You'll find a curled up leaf and you can uncurl it and you'll see most likely a caterpillar, a cocoon in there. And I just pick them off and squish them in the roll so I don't have to touch the caterpillar when I squish it.
So Loretta, can I say why I call these low risk?
Uh-huh.
Well, they're basically really easy to deal with. They're quick and easy to deal with unless the plant is very young. They're probably not going to do the plant in. And if you keep an eye on the plant, you can catch them when they're, early. This cabbage worm is called the European cabbage butterfly. It's that little white butterfly you see flying around now all the time. Prefers plants in the Brassica family, which is the cabbage family, but they definitely will lay eggs on other kinds of plants as well. And I'm going to click on one of these links. This slide deck is a resource for you. So if you want to know about cabbage worm and what to do about it, we are going directly to the pages that talk to you about the solution. So all of these items have got the little resource page. The medium risk ones are either harder to deal with for one reason or another, or more likely to kill the plant dead. And that's why it went to medium risk.
Okay, so you can see the first one, the leaf miner, it leaves an obvious little trail on the leaf. And it's in between the surface and the underside of the leaf. So that's what makes it hard to get to, or you can't do a soap spray or an oil because it's inside, it's protected and it toodles around. I see them on citrus trees, chard, a lot of leafy greens get it, and fruit trees get it too.
Well, actually, each one of these we've got a full page on.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have to go through each one because we're gonna right here.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So for leaf miners, it's a generalist. It prefers leafy greens, but will affect many different vegetable and flower hosts. When I say your first citrus leaves coming out of the winter on your citrus plants, you may see a few leaves with that on there too. But they're most active in the summer. Not too much of a problem in spring and fall. I just pluck them off. So you'll see the obvious lines and swirls and toodles there. So what's prevention? Grow your leafy greens in the cool weather when the flies that lay the little larval miner aren't active. And you could cover your plants with a floating row cover to prevent that to happen. If you've had no success with spinach or chard in the past, think about covering it up when they're young to keep them growing without a pest.
Yeah, I've had these take out a whole chard plant in the summer, so you can just growing at the right time of year is a great solution.
Leaf hoppers. So it looks like they have some powerful, looks like they're doing a sucking, scraping action on the leaves. You see them being modeled and you'll see them on there. They feed on different fruit and vegetable flowers and woody ornamental hosts. So the destructive stage are when they're adults and nymphs because they're very active and they can jump when disturbed. So it's hard to catch them. They're active in the summer and they overwinter as eggs on twigs and bark cracks. The feeding damage they do, they're sucking insects and they leave those stippled spots all over the leaves. So that's a good way to tell if that's what you got. The new shoots can curl, weakening the plant. So if a new leaf gets damaged like that, it isn't photosynthesizing. So it can weaken your plant.
So we don't have these too much here. It's not quite warm enough, but when you do have them over the hill, for example, San Jose area, they can get very prolific, and the nymphs are living on the underside of the leaves and they don't hop, but the adults just hop every which way. So it's very hard to do the soap spray thing or even a neem oil spray. The best deal is to try and prevent them from overwintering by cleaning your garden.
Oh, scales. I've seen a lot of that lately. The host plants are mostly trees, shrubs, and perennial plants. I get it on citrus trees that don't have enough air flowing through them. And they're destructive lifestyle stages when those nymphs, the little young fuzzy things, before they get too hard, they attach to bark and they suck as it grows. And they have a strong, tough armor. They're armored scales and soft scales, but they're hard to get to eradicate. Unless you just kind of, I use a soft brush and scrub them off, keep scrubbing them off. That works the best if you're not squeamish.
And they're related to aphids, so similar situation with the ants.
They're like a little barnacle. If you know what barnacles are on boats and things, they're like a little barnacle that attaches to a plant and just sucks away on there.
I'm going to move us a little faster because
Okay.
I think we're running out of time here.
Okay. Thrips. These are a tiny little thing. They're kind of hard to see, but you can see the damage they do. Some thrips are beneficial. So look for black little flecks on the leaves, on the underside of the leaves, on top of the leaves, little black dots. And you can look for little patches of where they suck and rasp. So you can look for those happening in the leaves too, little sucking and rasping spots. They also will jump when disturbed. In their adult form, they have little wings. So they're active in the summer and they just float on the wind. They could damage fruit, leaves, shoots, and cause general cosmetic damage. They rarely threaten the survival of the tree and shrub.
Especially flowers. So if you're growing
Yes.
flowers and you have flower thrips, they can come out ugly.
Yeah, you don't want to put those in a vase. They just aren't pretty. The petals are spotted and speckled.
And there's this new technique called using a reflective mulch. That can be a plastic silvery mulch, or you can even put tin foil down on the ground. And somehow it confuses the insects. And this is recommended for a number of different types of insects, like squash vine borers and things like that. This is worth a try. I have never done it, but I think it's interesting.
Same here. I haven't tried it either. But white flies. Oh, these are nasty. Broad range of hosts. They're destructive, both adult and nymph. They're active in the summer. Greenhouses often get them, and that's when you see that little flock of white things fly off a plant when you get close to it or bend down to look at it and touch it. Those are white flies. So you can see they feed by sucking the plant juices from the leaves, and they can cause a secondary sooty mold infection. Leaves turn yellow and fall off, and sometimes they can transmit diseases. So you prevent them by maintaining a good biological control and providing that habitat for beneficials. Pick and clip off your affected leaves. Sticky traps can be effective if they're close enough to the plant.
I find that I put a lot of yellow sticky traps, which is something you can buy or you can make. And then just go in and shake the plant. They fly up and then they go whack, smack right into the yellow sticky.
Good tip.
So we didn't do a full page on the low risk pests, but we did give you some solutions and behavioral notes that can come in. We can just use this as a resource. Unless somebody has an issue with any one of these that they want to discuss right now, tell us in the chat. Loretta, we have somebody who says she's seeing very large scales on an oak tree. Have you ever heard of that?
Large scales on an oak tree? No, I have not.
I've never heard of scale on an oak tree.
No, ever. They usually like a tender. Is it on tender growth or on mature, tough bark? Because, you know, they have to have a tender growth or a new limb or branch that they can hang out on in order to penetrate and suck the juices out of. Could be something else you're seeing that looks like a large scaly thing, but.
She says it just looks like real big scale. I have a feeling it's not scale. It might be a gall.
Or even some sort of a fungus, a chicken of the wood. Well, those are obvious, but there's a fungus. Is it on the base or on limbs? Is it around close to the soil line on the trunk?
We'll see if Elise speaks.
Not on the trunk. She said it's not on the trunk.
Not close to the soil line,
soil.
so it's not a mushroom.
Sorry, I completely forgot. I had muted myself and I relied only on chat, so sorry about that. It's not near the soil line. It just looks like a big gall, and I don't know if that's a disease or that's just what this oak has. I've seen it on two.
So there are galls, which is an insect that lays its egg in the bark of the plant, and then there's a little kind of a bubble that deforms and forms on the outside. It's not a scale. A scale insect you could pop off with a knife or a sharp blade. But a gall is completely integrated with the wood of the trunk.
Yeah.
So that needs to be diagnosed. And you can send a picture to the hotline.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you. Let's move beyond insects to other invertebrates.
Okay, other invertebrates. Earwigs. They can do a number on young little seedlings, old plants, the range of vegetable plants and weeds. So they can totally munch a stem of something and your whole plant is gone because they are voracious. Slugs and snails, of course, we dealt with those. Wide range of plants, not only disfiguring, but they can also cut down a young vegetable plant or something when they eat it. Sour pill bugs, we used to play with these. We thought they were really cute. They eat decaying vegetation in general. I have seen them munch young seedling, but I also had a lot of mulch around, and so they were eating the decaying mulch, and I think they just wanted some fresh vegetable. So that might be a keep it clean type of thing, and you wouldn't see a lot of sow bugs. Nematodes, those are in the soil and they can affect the plant roots and stems. Mostly low risk, but they can damage large portions of roots too, depending on the nematode and the crop you're growing.
There are hundreds of thousands of microscopic nematodes in the soil. 99% of them are good. There's one called a root knot nematode that's pretty common around here. It shouldn't be a big problem, but if you do get it, it can kill a plant. Most people know what to do about slugs and snails, but if you don't, let us know. We've got more slides in the appendix that we could go to. We could also speak to earwigs at more detail, but why don't we get through this and follow up in the questions.
Okay. So if you only do two things, you know what this is. It's a planting. It's a planting all around of flowers and insectary plants, nectar plants that will attract beneficials and good bugs.
And this happens to be our native flower garden at the demo garden. So native plants will attract native insects, and that's a good thing.
And then of course the physical, this physical barrier to keep them off your plants at critical stages.
That only helps you with flying insects and birds, by the way. But it really helps with those.
Yeah. So here's a list of organic or OMRI-approved products that you might want to look into. This first product, Serenade, has since changed names, but it's a bacteria that you can spray on plants, and it kills fungal diseases like mildews and downy and powdery, sooty molds, and things like that. This bacteria, BT, when you spray it on the caterpillars, makes them sick after a couple days and they die. Insecticidal soap will just pop those soft-bodied insects. We talked about this with the aphids. Horticultural oils. They can smother eggs and soft-bodied insects, and it also can help with fungus. There are dormant oils for the winter, a little heavier, that you can spray when your fruit trees are dormant, for example. And then there's lighter versions. They call them light oils or summer oils that you can use in the summer that won't suffocate your plants. Pheromone traps at the right time. And again, look, once you know what the bug is, the insect, look up on the UC Ipm website for when the right time is to put that trap out. So you put it out when those adult males are flying around. The yellow sticky traps that we talked about. Sluggo for slugs and snails. This works really well. And then Sluggo Plus, they add a spinosad to the Sluggo, and that's a natural occurring bacteria that will kill earwigs. And there's an ant one now made by the same company, and they coat the Sluggo Plus, it's finer granules, and they coat them with sugar or something, and the ants eat it, and that's a good ant control too.
So we did get a question in the chat about earwigs, and here's the answer to that. The two things you do with earwigs is you really clean up the yard. They like moist, cool, dark places to hide out during the day. And if you want to identify what it is, you go out with a flashlight at night and see what's chewing on your stuff. But Sluggo Plus will get slugs, snails, and earwigs. It is totally safe for pets and for birds, and it's organic OMRI approved. That's the Organic Materials Research Institute, I believe. So I don't use any of these things hardly, but I will use a little Sluggo Plus on occasion. I've used the yellow sticky traps for whiteflies in a greenhouse situation, and the pheromone traps are really useful if you put them in early spring, right as bloom is happening on your apple and pear trees for codling moth and brown apple moth. Those are big problems in our area. And these pheromone traps are generally used to monitor the presence of those insects. But if you put 2 or 3 per tree, you can confuse the males, and you can actually interrupt mating and reduce the population, and it works like a pesticide, preventative pesticide. The horticultural oil is something I would use if I had soft scale on a citrus tree and it was really flagging. But otherwise, I don't ever need to go to these things. There's other ways to do this. So here are the big guns, still organic, but
they'll kill all kinds. They'll kill good bugs as well as bad bugs. So be careful. Whoops. Did I do that? Oh. Did I change the page?
No, I changed the page. No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
It just flipped on us. Yeah.
That was me. I'm bad.
Okay, because it happened at the same time I moved my mouse. I thought, how did I do that? Okay. So just be careful, follow the instructions for dosage and when to do it. Usually these more toxic ones, they're done an hour before sunset or sometime during the night when you know that the bees are gone back home, and etc. So follow your instructions. But you have the spinosad, otherwise known as Captain Jack's. That's the name you'll see it under. I've never seen it on its own in another name than Captain Jack's. Neem, you can find lots of different companies that put out a neem oil. It's a broad spectrum, so be careful with it. And pyrethrins, natural source, but it's still a toxic insecticide.
Okay, may you never have to use them. Alrighty, so that was our parts on insects. I know some of you are interested in vertebrate pests and other things, and we may have time to talk about that in the Q&A. But before we go there, I want to talk a tiny bit about diseases. And in the summer, you can get some of those. So let's just kind of talk about the whole situation. You will not have a disease unless you have three things. The disease pathogen, got to have it in abundance, a susceptible host that gets that disease, and an environment that makes it happy for that pathogen to invade that host. Without all three of those things, you don't have a disease. However, you can't really control the host unless you buy a disease-resistant host, and you can't really control the pathogen because they're just out there in the world, viruses, bacteria, fungus, etc. You can't make them not be there. So the thing that you can control is the environment and the cultural conditions of the plant. And there are basically three types. The fungal type are the most prevalent, and you will actually see indications. You'll see signs of the disease. With rust, you will see little red pustules under the leaves. And you know it is a fungus, and you know it is rust because you're seeing basically the sporulating fruiting bodies. With black spot or powdery mildew, those are things you can see on the leaves. So you know what it is. Pretty easy to identify. There are some other things that would be signs or symptoms. So sign versus symptom. With fungal diseases, you can see the signs. With some other diseases, viral, for example, you may get leaf wilting with a mosaic virus, but you don't know if that's because you didn't water it enough, you watered it too much, because there's some damage to the tissue of the plant, because it's got a disease, because it's got some nutritional defect. So it's very hard to know from the symptoms the plant's exhibiting what the diagnosis is. And then there are bacterial molds. A bacteria needs the plant to be injured. It needs some point of entry. So a cut, a scrape, a broken stem, or some clippers that are already infected with something that you've, cut from one tree onto another. I think fireblight comes to mind with that. Those are hard because once you've got them, they're kind of like Phytophthora. It turns the plant into mush, soft rot mush. You've kind of lost the plant. And if having these hideous diseases was not enough, you've got insects that can vector the disease. So we just talked about leaf hoppers. They transmit curly top. Thrips, they can transmit a spotted wilt virus. So the viruses in particular can be transmitted via pest, and you've got double trouble. So we're not going to go into a lot of specifics about how to treat disease. Usually once you see it, it's too late. Certainly with a woody plant, that generally is the case. Here's an oak root fungus situation where once there's fungus coming up and fruiting at the base of the plant, you know that you're probably going to lose that plant. There's some manual ways of scraping the affected fungal parts away and hoping that it survives, but generally this is a place I wouldn't plant again for another 10 years or so. Certain plants that are susceptible to it. Prevention and the right conditions is the best way to go. You want to make sure the plant's healthy and getting all the sun it needs and getting the appropriate water. And And then when you do have to remove diseased plants, just do not compost them. Throw them in the garbage that's going to go to the landfill because it will transmit. And if it's a soil-borne disease, like Verticillium Wilt, for example, that's something tomatoes can get, then it's really hard to get rid of because it kind of just persists in the soil for a long time. So in that case, growing resistant variety is a good way to go. And we talked about the growing environment, keeping that healthy. So we're doing another little case study, and we're going to talk about whether it makes sense to treat 2 bacterial diseases. No, I'm sorry, this is fungal, this is bacterial. So let's start with a black spot on roses. We start by observing. We know that it's caused by a fungus and it's affecting leaves, and they're kind of getting spotty and then yellow, and then they're dropping off and they're falling on the ground. And it's not happening to all the leaves, but some of the leaves, and the plant keeps flowering. So we know it's not really killing the plant, but it looks ugly. So what are the things we could do? Well, we know that it's a fungus, and fungus likes water. So don't get the leaves wet. Also, if you're splashing water around on this, fungus, and it's fallen to the ground and it's splashing up from the dirt, you're just transmitting the disease. So you want to keep the leaves raked up and throw them in the trash. Get rid of all that leaf residue and make sure it's pruned so there's plenty of airflow. And make sure it's getting plenty of sun. And then, of course, you want a rose that's resistant to black spot. And frankly, I don't know a single rose in all of Santa Cruz County, on the coastal side anyway, that doesn't get some black spot. So it's very common. And with this, I wouldn't recommend a fungicide. There are some that will, you can try using, but the danger is not that bad, and the problems just doesn't really warrant it. On the other hand, you've got Verticillium Wilt, and I never can remember. Do you know, is Fusarium is the fungal one and Verticillium is the bacterial one?
Verticillium, the word looks bacterial. Anything that ends in
It's
that
an ilium.
ilium, it's an ilium. It's probably a bacteria like penicillium.
That's right. So I'm going to say that's the bacterial one. The problem with it, and let's go back to the picture here, is what part of the plant is it affecting? Leaves, a plant can live without a few leaves, but this is a stem, and we can see that the stem is turning brown. And this is the vascular part of the plant where the water and the nutrients go up and down the stem of the plant. You lose that, you've lost the plant. And that's exactly what's happening here. So this is a soil-borne disease. Once the plant has it, you're doomed. That's it. You might get, it usually happens. It's happened to me a couple of times where it's just about to give you a whole bunch of tomatoes, bunch of green tomatoes, and then it goes all crispy and brown and dies. And it's tragic. But you have to throw that plant away and get it out of there. And never, ever plant tomatoes in the same place twice in a row. It's a good idea to rotate your crops. Always choose resistant varieties if you know you have a problem. And there's a process called solarizing the soil, which is where you cover with clear plastic the soil in the hottest summer months. You basically put the soil out of commission for about 6 months, and it just bakes the heck out of the top 6 inches of the soil and kills any pathogens that are in it. And that can be helpful.
Do you keep wetting it under the plastic? I've never solarized. Does it work dry, or you want the moisture so you get a
wet
steaming?
it, and then you cover it, and then you kind of seal it around the edges. And I think that's all you have to do.
Okay.
You don't lift it. Don't expose more.
No
Yeah,
peeking.
You want to
Okay.
bake it. Okay.
Any questions?
We need help from Denise. She's going to feed us some questions.
I actually don't think there are any specific questions other than maybe a little bit more about powdery mildew. Is there anything specific on that you could add?
Powdery mildew. Yes, I can talk to that. So there's powdery mildew and there's downy mildew, and they look very similar. Downy mildew is kind of gray. Powdery mildew is this white fuzzy stuff. It can also be brownish. And it's a general fungus. Doesn't land on anything in particular, but you see it a lot on cucurbits, so squash and cucumber family plants. And it likes the warmer weather. It defies imagination, but one way is to address it is to actually spray the leaves hard, and it sort of knocks it off the leaves. You take the sporulating part off the leaves. So I just learned this, and I was shocked to learn that you water a fungus. You can cut the leaf off that's affected. I find that mostly this happens to me in the late summer, so maybe September when you're getting that Indian summer heat wave. And that's about the time the plant's ready to senesce and die for the winter anyway. So sometimes these things can be a clue that the party is over and it's time to pull this annual plant out of the ground. There are fungicides for it if it's not an annual plant. Loretta, tell us what to use on that.
Well, you can start off with something like what used to be called serenade. It's a bacteria. It has different names now, but it's a subtlest bacteria that can kill fungus. So you can try something like that before you go into a stronger fungicide. Well, we're going to talk about coppers and stuff like that, or not get into something that toxic. I know we're looking at OMRI approved, which copper is not, but it's if somebody.
Well, I would do sulfur rather than copper. Then.
Okay. So
there's another one that's it's like citric acid based.
Procytic is a citric acid.
How about that?
You can use it when you have a real light case, or use it as a preventive. And it doesn't like to grow around the acid. So if you're still appreciating all the zucchini you're getting, and you're not sick of it yet, and you don't want your plant to succumb, which usually that happens to mine all the time, but by then usually I'm sick of squash, you can spray it with a procytic. And it's a small concentration of citric acid in water. That's all it is. I hate to say online, but there's folks online that do similar things with vinegar and water, or even baking soda and water. It's something that's a different pH on that leaf to make it less hospitable to the powdery.
To a fungus,
yeah.
Those are all things to try, but
those are the known fungal killers. Neem is supposed to kill fungus, but that's a tough one to put on just for powdery mildews. I don't know if I would use it.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. It'd have to be a really bad case of powdery mildew for me to invoke a fungicide. I wouldn't necessarily do that. Try cutting it off. Depends on what the plant is.
All right, a couple other questions have come in. One is, I'll just have to kind of read it. I have a canker of some kind on my Italian buckthorns. Is there something that can be done to keep it from spreading, which it seems to be doing, or do they just need to be taken out?
It
was a what on a buckthorn? A canker?
No way we can answer this.
All right, sounds like one for the hotline.
Chris, send photos of your buckthorns to the hotline and let's see what they have to say.
All right, you mentioned insectary plants before. Would English lavender be one that would work well for that, particularly between citrus trees?
Bees like the lavender, but I think you want to attract more than just bees. You want the lace wings and all those things with small little compound flowers. that were shown in the picture.
So if you think of a yarrow or a carrot flower or Queen Anne's lace, they're like a little landing pad, and they have lots of tiny little flowers, and those are the very best flower form. Umbelliferae is the name of the flower form, to attract a wide variety of beneficials. Lavender is wonderful, and if you only can
Alyssum
smell
is another
lavender,
good one.
do it.
Yeah, white alyssum is really good too.
What is that?
Alyssum.
Yeah,
White
alyssum's another great one, and that's really easy to grow. You throw the seed out and run for your life. It just grows. So you want a variety. This is the main thing. And if you want to be really cool, you want to plant native flowers, because that will attract native pollinators and native beneficials. And that's good for the universe.
All right. Any other hints on deterring earwigs beyond the sluggo or the just eliminating places for them to hide?
Well, on half an acre, what are the earwigs eating, Debbie? Can you unmute and tell us about that? Can everybody unmute? We'll just talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah, they chow down every little seedling of flowers I tried to plant directly in the ground this year. I have none left. I'm thinking that's what it is. I did reach out to you guys a couple weeks ago, and they think it's earwigs. I just need to go out at night, although there's nothing left that's trying to grow. So, yeah, that's my question.
So going out at night is the critical thing. That's what you have to do to know if it's slugs that are hiding in the soil, or snails that are coming from the bushes, or earwigs that are hiding in piles of wood or in bark or in raised bed borders.
Okay. Yep. Which I have all of those.
Yeah.
Snails, I know people say you've probably gotten, but I have never seen one in 20 years up here. It's hot.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah, I know. No sign of it, no trails. They just don't appear to be up here. I could be wrong, but I've never seen any evidence of a snail.
Well, the sluggo with the sluggo plus, it's sluggo plus that has the
Okay.
spinosad, which is the earwig poison.
Right. Okay.
And that really works.
Okay.
So try one more planting.
Okay. And surround it with this sluggo plus, maybe.
And put a little sluggo plus out and go out at night.
Okay.
Do all those things and see what you catch.
Okay.
So you can try putting out a little trap to see if they're there, like a rolled up moist newspaper or rolled up moist paper in a tight little roll, and put it out there in the area.
Okay.
And the next day unroll it and look and see if you have earwigs crawl out of there.
Perfect. Okay, great.
And that used to be my method for killing them, is I would do these little traps and put the open end at the base of the plant, go out with my morning coffee at 6:30 in the morning, shake it out on a hard surface, and then they go scampering away and I'd step on them.
Oh, okay.
So if you do that 3 nights in a row, you're going to knock back some population.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
There, all things earwig. Buckthorn's not a clue. And LA, how do I say your name, LA?
Lahe.
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 I would not just randomly cut down all the bay trees for sure.
Okay.
I would get an arborist out to look at your property. From what you're saying, you have lots of things to talk about.
Yes. Is there a list of good native plants that would work as insecticides, like you've been suggesting? I know all the natives are good, but is there particular ones
Yes.
that
yes.
would be good for backyard gardens?
Yes, and I'm going to move on to a next slide here, and I'm going to talk about what's coming soon. So coming soon, we have a California native plant seed saving class. It's coming on the 27th. And she's going to talk about native wildflowers. And she's actually going to talk about saving the seed from those wildflowers now to plant for next year. But out of that, you'll get a list of, you'll get a resource, an amazing resource website that gives you everything you need to know about California natives. And I'm sure you can ask that question and get a great answer.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you
I signed
register
up
for
for
it
it
and you can't be present for the actual meeting, then we send the recording after to everyone who registered anyway.
I registered, but not for the in-person one is full.
Yeah, the in-person one is full, and that's not so much what you're needing. You need to know what the plant list is.
Yes, I do have, I registered for that one.
Excellent. We'll see there.
Yeah.
Someone wanted to know about deer. Is the deer person still with us?
I posted that I found out through my little gardening project this summer that deers do not go near garden if you plant zucchini in the border, like really that, and also corn.
Well,
They
that is
just
not
don't go
true at
close.
all.
Really?
I'm sorry.
They did
that is
not eat
true at all.
the strawberries, but they did not go near they ate the lettuce and everything else, but they did not touch the zucchini or the corn.
Well, it may not
Maybe
be
they
their
had other.
preference to eat it, but it won't keep them out of the garden.
That's true.
So the only way to deal with deer is if you want to grow a nice juicy lettuce garden and have some salad, it's fencing. And there's a lot of ways to do fencing that's inexpensive and effective. There are also ornamental plants that you can grow that they do not love. Now, they will try everything. They will eat things they don't like if they're really hungry. But there are some plants that are pretty deer-proof. And we have a list of those. And I'll just take you up to the beginning. All the things we said we wouldn't talk about.
Right. Right. I remember this.
Nope. Wait, I just saw the gopher. I
It
saw.
was in the beginning.
No.
You
You
said
guys
you
needed a
were
little
gonna
rewrite?
include it. Yeah.
Here, down
That's
this
right.
last link on the bottom of the page, that's a deer
Yes.
resistant plant list.
Right.
And
right.
this presentation, this link up above it, is our whole
Mhm.
vertebrate IPM presentation. So you can download those and look at them.
Perfect. We'll get all these slides in the email. So
You
I'll
will
wait for
get
that.
them in the next day or two. Yes.
Okay.
All right, let me talk a little bit about what's coming up next. There's many slides in the back with more detail on slugs and earwigs and other things. So that will come as a bonus. If I can get even out of here. All right, so we would appreciate if you guys would send us, answer this survey. And the survey is going to go into the chat. Denise, do you have it or do I need to?
It's in right now.
It's in.
Yeah.
All right. So if you, as you know, quick like bunnies, go give us a little evaluation. See how we're doing. We always like to improve. And then in a couple of weeks, you should get email from the California State Master Gardener Program. They like to know if you're using the information that you learned on the class, and that's how they get funding, and that's how this program gets funding. So thank you for answering those questions when they come to you. And then we did talk about this native plant seed saving class, which I highly recommend. It's really interesting. The person that's teaching it is working with the Native American tribal group to restore native plants in this area, and it's a really interesting project. And we're working on something, gardening with children. So one of our master gardeners has little kids, and she's created this amazing world in her backyard of kind of play spaces with horticulture. So that's really good for anybody who has kids or teaches kids. It's for adults, but it's going to be fun. And those of you who want to become a master gardener and get the extensive training that we receive, and then be on classes like this and talk to people and diagnose problems and just pursue your horticultural passion, hang out with great people. We are taking applications for 2022. We'd love to have you.
Oh, Daisy, when do we know if our application was accepted or not? I've done that.
Well,
don't
if you send your
know. I don't know.
application, you will hear back for an interview. And there's also an informational meeting that you're required to attend that really lets you know what you're supposed to, you have to pay for this education with volunteer hours. There's lots of different ways to volunteer, but
Great.
you will hear back.
Okay, thank you.
Don't worry. Thank you for applying. That's great. Alrighty. Last call for questions, and we're going to call it a day. Thank you all. Loretta, thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming. Denise, thank you for your help.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.